S.H.Figuarts' Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man was released in two batches, the first on the 18th of March and the second on the 24th of March as a Premium Bandai Web exclusive and retails for 8,800 yen or $80 US before shipping. Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man, which is what I'll be calling it for the rest of this review, is part of the S.H.Figuarts Spider-Man No Way Home series of 3 figures so far, and I say so far because Tamashii did show off a Figuarts Green Goblin at a recent event, but I mean at this point it could very well be just another prototype and nothing else, but let's hope that's not the case. Anyway, the wave so far includes the Amazing Spider-Man Andrew Garfield, Integrated Suit Spider-Man Tom Holland, and Tobey Maguire, the Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man. And out of all 3 releases, this is definitely the one I'm looking forward to the most, with Andrew coming in at a close second and Tom tailing at the end. My personal excitement for each individual figure doesn't necessarily reflect how I feel about each Spider-Man as a character, but I will say this though. There is a whole lot of nostalgia attached to Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man, more so than any of the other 2 Spider-Man by far. I love the Tom Holland movies, I love the Amazing Spider-Man suit, probably my favorite out of the 3, but Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man was my Spider-Man growing up. I think if you were young enough or old enough, as old as I am now, you'll probably understand what I'm talking about. The feeling of sitting in the cinema watching a live action Spider-Man movie for the first time on the big screen. I was blown away the first time I saw Spider-Man swinging across New York City. It was just something that as a Spider-Man fan back then was a pretty big deal. I mean, we see a lot of live action Spider-Man in so much media in recent years, but back then it was something you could only dream of one day happening. And they did it, and it's a feeling and experience that never left me. So it's been more than 15 years, can you believe it? 15 years since the last time we got a 6-inch Tobey Maguire Spider-Man figure with Toy Biz Spider-Man 3 line. Not the best toy line out of the 3 movies, but we did get some bangers along the way with Superposable Spider-Man from Spider-Man 2 that had a whopping 46 points of articulation and in my opinion still holds up pretty well in terms of being a highly articulated 6-inch action figure. I guess there really wasn't a right time or demand for another 6-inch Tobey Maguire Spider-Man up until now, and with the Marvel Legends version just beyond the horizon, I think we will see a couple more versions from a few more companies in the near future. I'm looking at you, Marvex. But for now, we have the Figuarts version, and I'm really liking this figure so far. First up, it has the proportions of Tobey Maguire Spider-Man. I think the actor is around 5'7", 5'8", not the tallest out of the 3 Spider-Men, but he's got that athletic build. He isn't tall and lanky like Garfield, and the body looks a little stockier, a little older than say Tom Holland Spider-Man. I mean, it'll be interesting to line up all 3 Spider-Men together once I get them in hand, but I think Tamashii did a really good job in capturing an older, still somewhat fit, but not ripped Spider-Man in figure form, which is kind of what the Toy Biz figure was. With this, you don't get that exaggerated superhero muscle definition, but it kind of pulls off that look of a relatively fit guy in a spandex suit. So the proportions are great and the details are even better. With movie costumes, it's almost always more intricate in terms of design compared to their comic counterparts. The Tobey Maguire Spider-Man costume has the raised webs, the textured patterns, and the body shading to further accentuate the musculature. And what you saw on the screen is translated pretty well into this figure. You've got these sculpted in raised web lines in silver that are painted on very clean. I guess it's more of a gunmetal than silver. The spider logos are raised, and because of the gunmetal paint, when you catch it in the right light, really makes the front spider emblem pop. The red spider logo at the back is broken up by the upper and lower torso, which I guess can't be helped considering how big it is, but I guess sacrifices have to be made somewhere because the upper and lower torso does allow for some really good ab crunch, which I will go over a little later in the video. The reds are a nice deep red, not too dark, but a tad brighter than maybe what we see on screen. There's a bit more yellow in the red, but when you couple it with the darker kind of metallic blue and the gunmetal that reflects the light, I think it works very well. The suit also has this textured grid pattern all over the body, and sometimes more detail can actually be a detriment to the figure, because all that detail just washes every other detail out of the figure. But with this textured pattern, it's small enough and the web lines are spaced out far enough to give you a really cohesive balance. But on top of that, we also get some shading on the blue areas of the suit, more so on the legs, and it's kind of hard to show on camera, but in the right light, it's definitely there and gives the figure just that more depth. It's a nice little detail, but I do wish it also carried over to the red areas of the suit as well, like the real costume. Now to the all-important head sculpts for me. This is just the right size along with the rest of the body. Again, it looks like there is a head underneath the mask. The real suit from the movie had a shell underneath the mask to keep, that kind of distinct shape of Spider-Man, and I think Figuarts did a good job in recreating that. The lenses are a nice silver, although I guess they look more like a white in this bright light. They're not as pearlescent like they are in the movie, but you still get that bit of metallic sheen to them. While the eyes are sculpted, the silver lenses themselves are just painted, unfortunately. I would have liked them to be sculpted in, just to add that little bit more extra depth. Now we get to the unmasked Tobey Maguire heads. Now, if I'm being honest here, I haven't had the most experience with unmasked heads with Figuarts. I've owned a couple of Iron Man releases, a few Captain Americas, which were horrible and looked nothing like Chris Evans. So my expectations initially weren't really the highest, but I'm actually pleasantly surprised at how well these unmasked heads came out. Even the smiling face, which I was kind of worried about after seeing everybody's photos on Instagram, the sculpt is definitely there. The positioning of the eyes, the mouth, the nose. I think it bears a pretty good resemblance to Tobey Maguire, and even the facial printing tech looks better than I thought it would. Sure, it's the Monet effect where you have a bunch of dots that make up a image when you look at it from a distance, but even when you get up close, you still get some pretty decent detail. I think he needs a bit more of a 5 o'clock shadow, and for my particular stern face, I think they kind of missed the mark about maybe a fraction of a millimeter, because it looks like the eyes are printed just a tiny bit off to the left. It doesn't bother me too much, because now I guess it looks like he's looking off to the side, which I don't mind, though when I compare to the promotional pictures, there is definitely something a little bit off. I don't know, I might have to repaint it myself or get some really talented customizer to do it for me, but other than that, I'm pretty satisfied. The heads look pretty good, both of them. The sculpt work for the hair also looks pretty great, and you even get that kind of messed up hair at the top look going on with his smiling face to kind of recreate that messy hair look when, Tobey takes off his mask. The paint job is a little bit dull though, and could have done with, some kind of wash or maybe even some highlights, just something to give it a bit more oomph, a bit more dimension. But I will say this though, I'm just really happy Tamashii were able to give us not just one, but 2 unmasked heads with this release, unlike a certain other Spider-Man. QC-wise, I haven't had the best of luck with my Figuarts Spider-Man in the past, which is one of the reasons why I stopped buying S.H.Figuarts Spider-Man figures. My last Figuarts Spider-Man snapped in half at the torso, my Darth Vader snapped at the legs where it connected to the waist, and I think all of that could have been avoided if I just took some time with oiling up the joints. In saying that, I haven't had any trouble with any of my Dragon Ball Figuarts, and that's what I collect the most. Anyway, you want to be careful with the shoulders, as mine were extremely tight and still are, and I'll have to get around to oiling those joints up. And because of the independent ball hinge it uses, will probably dislodge or is likely to snap if you try to move it in a way that it doesn't want to move. Everything else seems to be fine, no loose joints, and my copy doesn't seem to be suffering from any paint rub so far. But still, you want to be careful around those easy to rub places like the torso, and again, oil up those joints before you pose this guy. Alright, so let's take a look at Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man's articulation, and I haven't actually handled an S.H.Figuarts Spider-Man figure since the first MCU Homecoming Spider-Man figure, which feels like an eternity, a lifetime ago. I've kind of never really gone back to Figuarts for Spider-Man figures. Marfex and Marvel Legends have kind of, filled in that need in terms of Spider-Man figures for me, but this figure here has some pretty interesting points of articulation, some pretty interesting things going on, some things that I really do like and some things that maybe they could have done just a little bit better, but overall some really great articulation for a Spider-Man figure. So we're going to start off with the head, and he looks up that much, and you can push it ever so slightly just to try to get his head a little bit more parallel, so when you have him in a forward crunching, I guess, 4-point pose, he can look a little bit more parallel, which you want. You don't want him looking down. He's got some great head tilt, left and right, and he can bury his head way into his chest. So for his shoulders, we get some butterfly joints that allow his arms to come in about that much. So good for those double-handed web swinging poses. Not too much going out, but because, and I'll talk about these later, because of these ball hinge joints here, you can get Spidey to bring his arms about that much far back. You do get some really good range going up and down though. So those butterfly joints, I guess, work a little bit better moving up and down than in and out. So going back to those ball hinge joints, like I said, they aren't your traditional, and I'm going to bring in Mafek's symbiote Spider-Man here just to show you what I mean. So traditionally, and I guess it's the same with Marvel Legends as well, the actual shoulder is a part of the hinge, or the hinge is part of the shoulder, like so. But for this guy here, it kind of reminds me of the Revoltech joints, because you've got this kind of smaller ball hinge that connects via a straight peg and a ball peg into the butterfly joint, which is a socket. And it just kind of threw me off because I thought it would be just your traditional, larger ball hinge, but it does allow for, I guess, some hidden shoulder swivel there. But you also have your upper bicep swivel as well. So it works and it functions, really well. It gives you a good range, but it does feel, or at least personally for me, it does look aesthetically a little flat underneath here, and you've got a little bit of a gap there. But I mean, if you're familiar with Revoltech joints and Revoltech figures, this will be nothing new to you. But for people who don't collect that line, again, it might throw you off a bit. But once you get used to it, it does actually give you some really good range. Anyway, going back to the elbows, double jointed elbows, look at that, fantastic. One thing I don't like is the actual joints themselves. They've made it all blue. It would have been really nice if they painted like at least half of it to kind of make it look aesthetically more cohesive, because that kind of sticks out like a sore thumb. But we do have your traditional ball hinge there for the wrist. And of course you get that swivel. I'm not crazy about these ball hinge joints here. I think they stick out way too much. I think it would have been a lot nicer for the hands to kind of, connect a little bit closer to the actual wrist. And I think that's because they've done this because, we get the web lines that connect, that hook onto these ball hinge joints. So I guess you'd need that extra space. And it does give you, a bit more leeway and a bit more range. But aesthetically, I'm not really liking how they look. They just stick out way too much. Looking at the ab crunch, we get a ball joint there at the upper torso. So we get a fantastic range. Look at that. Around and around she goes. So really good side to side. Of course, you get that swivel there, but it does break up the the red spider logo there. But I really like that they've extended this spider logo at the back all the way to the top. So when you do have Spider-Man crunching forward, it still looks like one, cohesive logo. Again, when you do swivel it back and forth like that, left and right, it does break it up. And they should have given us a swivel there at the waist, but they didn't. But when you have Spider-Man crunching forward, you've got that extra lower back piece there that covers up what I guess would be traditionally nothing So I really like what they've done there, covering up that, I guess covering up as many gaps as possible, which looks so much better. The, I guess, crotch piece here is a softer plastic. And when we get into the hips, for some reason my right leg can extend just a little bit further than my left leg. It's not quite 90, but it's pretty close. Not quite 180, I mean, but it's pretty close. Spider-Man can kick back and forward really well, as you would expect. He's got your upper thigh cut, double knees. The feet move down really well, move up quite far up, and you got your toe joint there, and some fantastic ankle tilt as well. So all in all, some really cool articulation going on for Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man. Pretty much everything you would need for a Spider-Man figure, and just a lot of fun to pose around. For accessories, it's pretty much everything you would want in a standard Spider-Man figure. You've got your fists, your wall-crawling hands, a set of signature thwipping hands, a pair of webline grabbing hands, 2 mask-holding hands, and the all-important meme pointing hand, which I'm sure will come in handy for a variety of poses and situations, although we all know what we will be doing once we get all 3 Spider-Man together. For heads, you get the 1 masked head and 2 unmasked heads. Again, just to give you a closer look at all those details. We also get an unmasked mask. And for your webline grabbing hands, we also get a couple of different sized weblines as well, made of a translucent plastic, 1 long webline, 2 medium length weblines, and 2 short weblines, which I probably will never use, but hey, they are what they are, and if they're your cup of tea, then that's great. I don't really like this system of attaching web lines because that means the actual wrist pegs are more visible. But again, that's just me. Overall, I think this is a really solid release from Tamashii and the best 6-inch Tobey Maguire Spider-Man figure we have so far. Not that there's much competition. Yes, we do have the Marvel Legends on the way, and I'm sure Marvex will give us an eventual No Way Home trio in 5 or 10 years. But as it stands right now, I'm having a lot of fun with this one. Yes, the crotch design might not be the most appealing for some. I'm not liking how prominent the wrist joints are. I think the hands should sit a little closer to the wrists themselves. For my personal copy, the eyes are just a bit off to the right for the unmasked head, and the elbow joints should be red and blue instead of just a solid blue. But despite those shortcomings, the sculpt work, the proportions, the articulation, and accessories just makes for a super fun Spider-Man to pose. It looks great and handles just as good. And again, Tobey Maguire was my big screen Spider-Man growing up, and I'm just really happy companies are coming back around to this version of Spider-Man after so many years because of the No Way Home movie, of course. And I know we'll get a few more options from other companies in the near future, but right now, I'm very happy with this release and really excited to see what Tamashii give us with the other 2 Spider-Man releases, even without the Andrew Garfield unmasked head. Alright guys, that's it from me. I hope you enjoyed this review. Who's your movie big screen Spider-Man? What's your favorite movie Spider-Man suit? Again, mine is probably the Amazing Spider-Man 2 suit, but I'd love to hear all from you. Kind of a quiet month for March in terms of Dragon Ball releases, but we have a huge month in April, including Super Saiyan Vegeta, Second Form Frieza, and the new Future Trunks. So make sure you come back for those, make sure you're subscribed and notifications turned on, because again, it's going to be a jam-packed, amazing month. Have a fantastic weekend, everybody. Take good care of yourselves, be good to your moms, and as always, yoroshiku.